have the power to solve this problem, or it doesn't have the leverage to solve this problem?
Well, I would say first that it's been 7 days. Every single life that is lost, a Palestinian life, an Israeli life, is a tragedy. It has been 7 days. As you know, these conflicts have been far longer than that. That is not our objective, of course. We want to de-escalate as quickly as possible. But yes, it would require actions from Israel. It would require actions from Hamas to end the violence on the ground. There are a range of parties and entities who are involved in those discussions, and we want to play as constructive a role as humanly possible.
I just have one more quick one. Is it fair to say that you don't want to answer the question yes or no whether the president feels the Israeli response has been disproportionate?
I don't think it's constructive. We are going to take everything we convey, whether it's a statement or an action, is going to be to the end of de-escalating the situation on the ground. Hence, we're not going to give a day-by-day grade. Clearly, we want to end the violence. Clearly, we want to de-escalate. Clearly, we want the lives of Palestinians, Israelis to be saved. Go ahead, Nancy.
The Washington Post reported that the Biden administration earlier this month approved $735 million in weapon sales to Israel. Is the White House considering putting that on hold during the fighting? And is the Israeli response forcing the administration to reconsider future arms sales?
I've seen the report. I would say the State Department would be the entity to confirm, which I don't believe they have, any future sales or weapon sales. We do have an ongoing and abiding strategic security relationship and partnership with Israel, but in terms of the status of that or considerations moving forward, I'd point you to the State Department.
And just one more question. Did the president speak directly with any Republican senators over the weekend on the infrastructure proposal or the negotiations?
I don't have any calls to read out for you. Sometimes these are scheduled, sometimes they happen on the fly, and oftentimes, maybe we'll just keep the theme going of diplomacy here. Sometimes those are best happening without particular readouts to have a constructive outcome. Let's see, go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. Just one more on Israel.
Sure.
As this crisis, gets worse and worse every day, are there any concerns that we might not be able to hit the Afghanistan withdrawal deadline and might need to intervene in a peacekeeping fashion somehow?
No.
No, not at all. Okay.
I've not been made aware of any concern of the overlapping of an impact on our Afghan withdrawal.
Glad to hear it. On a different notion, or a different subject rather, the mask guidance again. Has this triggered a new conversation about whether we need to have, perhaps not a mandate, but a standard vaccine passport that businesses can use, or is this decision going to be left up to the states? I know the president was pretty critical of his predecessor for sort of taking that hands-off approach.
It has not changed our view that the federal government will not be playing that role. The private sector may, and it may prompt the private sector moving forward on actions, which is where we think it's appropriately situated. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. So EU officials actually announced earlier that Johnson & Johnson would be cutting its COVID-19 vaccine deliveries to the bloc by about half this week, and they were already behind schedule for the second quarter. Just in light of Biden's apparent announcement later that he's going to be sending 20 million vaccine doses abroad, is there any do you have any readouts for what countries are actually these vaccines are actually going to be sent to?
So let me just make sure I understand your question. So which countries are going to get these 80 million doses that we are announcing? It's a great question. I know everybody's eager to know where are they going. I expect we'll have more in the coming days on what our criteria will be and our approach and some of where it will be sent to once it's approved through the FDA.
On the EU, was disputes over intellectual property have at all to do with reduced exports there, or any conversation?
I think that's really a question for Johnson & Johnson and their manufacturing.
And one more question. Mm-hmm. And then, so inflation numbers obviously last week came back higher than were expected. As the Biden administration deliberates internally on the American Jobs and Families Plan, would consistent levels of inflation or changes in the jobs reports influence the proposals that you all will be bringing to Congress in the package, or changing some of the policies that you all would propose if that continues?
Is, just to make sure I understand your question, are the CPI numbers from a few weeks ago impacting our proposals that we are?
Changing policies you would propose, given increased inflation numbers, or?
No, it's a good question. I just want to make sure I understood it. It is, as we looked and dug into the data, and we talked about this a little bit last week, some of this data is kind of fascinating, I will say, but is that the economy is turning back on. we take inflation very seriously. Our Secretary of Treasury, obviously the Federal Reserve is responsible for monitoring it, but there are a number of factors as the economy turns back on, including there are areas like the cost of airline tickets, where if you look back at pre-pandemic, they dropped by about 20%. They're up about 10% since then, right? So there are prices where the baseline was actually lower than it was prior to the pandemic, and that's one of the things we're seeing in the data. But it has not changed our view and the view of economists, I would say, around the country, that there's more that needs to be done to put 8.5 million Americans back to work, to ensure that we are getting working families, working mothers, the assistance they need, and to ensure we're competitive over the long term. So it has not changed our overarching objectives and approach and our proposals. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, I wanted to follow on your opening remarks on taxes. Will you be releasing today the president's and vice president's tax returns?
We will be soon releasing, as we believe is the transparent approach and what the public expects, the tax returns of the president. I'll have to double check on the vice president, but I would expect those will be out soon.
But not necessarily today.
Soon, so I would say stay tuned. Stay at your computer.
One last thing on that. It used to at least be the policy that president's returns were always automatically audited. If he is audited, that doesn't change your decision at all on releasing the return.
No, I would expect that we will continue to release the president's tax returns, as should be expected by every president of the United States. Go ahead.
Hi, Jen. On Friday, BuzzFeed News was able to, within minutes, find President Biden's private Venmo account, which is funny, but also speaks to the epidemic of privacy concerns that everyone in this country has, let alone the president. And I'm just wondering whether any kind of federal digital privacy reform, any legislation is on your radar.
It's a really good question, and I'm very aware of the BuzzFeed story that came out last week. I will have to probably check with our team and see if there's any specific privacy concerns, privacy legislation or proposals that are being considered. I would suspect there may be, but I would de-link it from the Venmo report, which was a very interesting report, because obviously this is something that impacts millions of Americans out there who have a range of accounts, but I'm happy to check with them and we can get back to you.
And I need to ask a Canada question.
A Canada question?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Josh isn't here, so I'm going to take
Sure.
it. Are there any talks right now with the Canadian government about reopening the northern border? Is that something that this administration is pushing for? And as you know, Canada is a bit behind the U.S. in vaccination rates. I'm wondering whether there is any threshold you'd like to see them hit in Canada before the border is reopened.
I don't have any update on the timeline. We are certainly always assessing, as it relates to travel, borders, et cetera, what we need to do and keep in place in order to keep the American people safe, especially during a global pandemic. But we are constantly evaluating. I don't think we have specific criteria to make available, but you can let me know after, or let us know after which reporter we should follow up with on it, and we can see if there's more specifics on that. Go ahead, Yamiche.
Thanks so much for taking my question. Does President Biden think that there are any war crimes being committed right now in the Middle East? There are some experts who told the New York Times that they think that there could have been war crimes on both sides.
We're not going to be making an assessment of that from here. Our objective is on taking every step we can to reduce the violence, to de-escalate the situation on the ground, to save lives, to ensure that we are bringing some stability back on the ground.
I mean, just to follow up, is the White House at all, I guess maybe, or is the president at all concerned just about the number of civilians that are being killed? That's why some of these experts are telling the New York Times that these are war crimes.
Well, I would say, Mish, that in the readouts that we put out this weekend, we included, and as I've noted a little bit earlier in the briefing, his concern about the lives lost. Every life lost is a tragedy, and certainly that's why we are eager to de-escalate the violence on the ground, bring an end to the conflict, so that more lives can be saved.
Can I ask you, I want to also switch to COVID. The largest national nurses union is saying that the CDC guidelines on masks is putting frontline workers, and especially people of color, at risk, and that they're calling for the CDC to reverse that. What's the White House's stance on that union in particular, saying that their members and people of color are at risk?
Well, I would say we don't have any particular response directly to the union. I will say that, again, the objective of the CDC and of Dr. Walensky was to to deliver on the commitment she made to the American people, which is to provide guidance based on health and scientific evidence on what people can do that is safe. And so her guidance that was put out last week makes clear that if you have been vaccinated, their recommendation is that you are safe not to wear a mask inside, outside, and when you're not in large public gatherings. There's going to be a determination about implementation, and there are going to be populations and communities where they take a different approach to implementation, because a lot of it is going to be based on the level of vaccination, the level in each community. So we certainly respect and value that, but it is still our view is that that science is the North Star. She was delivering on her promise, and we will continue to work with a range of communities on implementation.
Can I ask you a follow-up on COVID? I've talked to some people who are very worried about the idea that we're operating on an honor system in a lot of ways, that we're in places like Walmart and Target, there's already starting to be rule changes based on the CDC guidance. What do you say to people who think it's worrisome to be operating on an honor system, that it could put kids or even immune-compromised Americans at risk?
Well, I would say that what this guidance provides is information to the public about what they can do to be safe. Wear a mask. If you're not vaccinated, that applies to kids. I have 2 kids. That isn't always easy, but that is the health and medical guidance. If you are vaccinated, you no longer need to wear a mask in these settings. So the guidance is actually pretty clear, but it gives people the information and the power to be able to protect themselves. If you get vaccinated, you go through your 2 doses, you're 2 weeks past your doses, you no longer need to wear a mask. If you are not, you should still wear a mask to protect others, but also to protect yourself. And it also makes clear that kids should still wear masks. So I would say that we know people are digesting this. We've all been wearing masks. Many of us have been wearing masks, I should say, for 14 months now. And different companies, different organizations, different communities are going to implement based on a range of factors, including vaccination levels, cases, transmission rates. And we all should respect that. But it was the responsible step to put out the data from the scientists when it was available. And that's exactly what we did.
My question that was on kind of the enforcement of this and the honor system idea that you're trusting Americans all over this country to follow those guidelines.
Well, what I'm saying is that, though, you're empowered, if you are not vaccinated, to wear a mask. So it is less about the honor system. You don't have to trust the person next to you has been vaccinated if you have not been vaccinated. If you wear a mask, the guidance is saying that that provides protection. So, it doesn't, if you're vaccinated, you don't need to wear a mask. So the honor system is, I'm not sure I completely understand that argument, given it provides guidance directly to individuals about what they can do to protect themselves.
One quick last one, which
Sure.
is the CDC, from my understanding, it's saying that it's not going to be tracking breakthrough people who get the virus if they're already vaccinated, unless they're hospitalized or they die. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what the thinking behind that, why the president thinks that that's the best way forward to not track people who get the virus if they're vaccinated, if they don't get hospitalized or die.
I know that we'll have a health briefing, a COVID team briefing, I believe tomorrow, if I'm remembering correctly the schedule, and it's an excellent question that I encourage you to ask them, and it's certainly one that should be answered by medical experts. Go ahead, Lalit.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you about India. What is your assessment of the COVID-19 situation in India? And President has already announced 100 million of assistance to India. Is it thinking about additional more assistance to India?
Well, I would say, I'm not going to be able to give an assessment as a non-public health expert of the situation on the ground in India. We remain closely in touch and engaged, and we will continue to work through how we can provide assistance during this difficult time. As you noted, we expect our assistance to be about $100 million. We've sent 7 air shipments funded by the U.S. Agency for International Development to India. The 7th flight carrying additional oxygen concentrators via commercial shipping center arrived today, and that obviously is critical for a number of the patients who have already been already battling COVID. So we will continue to provide a range of assistance. We will remain in touch about what the direct needs are on the ground and hope that we can play a constructive role in reducing the numbers and bringing some relief to the people of India.
Has the president reviewed the situation himself with his senior officials? And of those 80 million AstraZeneca vaccines, would India be one of the recipients? If yes, how much would India receive?
Well, first, let me say the president is, of course, kept abreast of the COVID pandemic, how it's impacting different regions in the world, including our important partners in India. And he has been deeply engaged as we've made determinations about the type of relief and assistance that we can and should provide. In terms of how we will distribute the doses, it's an excellent question. I expect and hope we'll have more in the coming days on how our team, led by Jeff Zients, in partnership with our national security team, will be making those determinations, what criteria they'll be looking at, and where the doses will be going.
One final one. One of the consequences of President's visa ban, travel ban with India has been several hundred families have been separated across India and US. Some of them are working there, some of them went to travel. Is there a way to unite those families back or not to wait endlessly?
Within India? Within India?
There are some families who are working here, they went to India for travel or to get their visa stamped, but because of the ban, they are not able to come back and join their families here.
I know that's very difficult. It's a great question. I think the State Department is probably the best entity to have a discussion with about that. Okay, thanks everyone.